me. Going to like, subscribe, Miniature Dork Universe, push the buttons. Oh, I peed. I mean, push the button, Miniature Dork Universe, like, subscribe.
Oh man, that miniature dorkloid sniffed so many glue fumes he ruined his brain and turned into a fucking cyclops.
Push button, like, subscribe, you push the button, push it.
No way, man, that channel sucks.
What you talk about? Channel excellent, you sucks. Alright fellas, here we go again. I said I was going to do this video a while back, and here it is finally. So, yeah, have you ever received something like this in the mail? It's a resin Italian building, and the casting's pretty bad. There's globs of resin in weird spots. This window isn't too bad, but there's lots of air bubbles and yeah, like that kind of stuff. So in this video I'm going to show you how to fix a lot of these errors in the casting, but also I'm going to show you how to add to this things like these. This is a Peter Pig chimney. I'm doing a 12mm scale. This is actually a 15mm chimney, but it's a bit small, so I'm going to figure out a spot to plunk this down on the roof, and there's going to be a lot of details added to this. So it's going to be a repair, but also how to sort of add. So yeah, you can take things like this, sand all this glop off the bottom with some heavy sandpaper, and then I'll show you how you can go in and fix things like this square shaped sort of hole in the wall, vent or whatever it is. It's totally filled in. So I'll show you how to fix stuff like that, and corners, how to make things like this round again. So just stay tuned and we'll get into it. So number one tool you're going to want is a decent chisel. I have a couple different sizes with a big handle. So this is I would say my smaller one. And these are handy for fixing windows, or if you've ever gotten some of the Battlefront resin tanks and vehicles, sometimes you get that big glop of resin where the wheels or tracks are supposed to go. A chisel like this will take it out, but here we can use it for these windows. Many of the Italian buildings I looked at had 2-pane windows, so I'm going to use the chisel not only to take off any globs of resin that shouldn't be there, but also to remove some of this window framing that I'm not going to want. And make sure the chisel is new and reasonably sharp, and you can work from side to side and get that quite smooth. The window above it had globs of resin in it, and I cleaned it out with a chisel, and you can see how clean you can get it looking. And on the back wall you can see here how many of these windows are just really crappy. Not a lot of detail and globs. It doesn't look very realistic at all. So we're going to fix all of it simply with a chisel. Some manufacturers of this resin terrain are really guilty of this. I'm not going to mention their names and put them in the hot seat, but if you do receive something like this, yeah, don't freak out, because you can, with a bit of work, make it look pretty good. I mean, it is a bit of a pain because you might rather just paint them and get them on the table. However, as I was figuring out ways to fix these, I also realized, well, you can use these same methods to embellish these things. So if they're kind of plain or whatever, or even if they're not plain, or even if the casting is nice on them, like say some of the Battlefront resin terrain, it's well casted, but sometimes it's a little bit on the boring side, or there's not much going on. Well, you can use these tools that I'm going to show you in this video to embellish it, and I'll show you some of the ways I've embellished this to give it like a balcony and an extra doorway where there's just a big plain wall. And as you can see, I've taken the extra frames off of these for those 2-pane windows, and you can see it's a lot clearer than some of these other ones that have been casted poorly. After jolly well correcting all those crappy windows, I moved on to the crappy roof. So I started to just get all those globs out of there, and you can see on the side too those big streaky lines. I used the chisel to get some of that stuff out as well. And I'll also use an engraving tool. So if the chisel makes it look too flat and uniform on the rough textured wall, I'll use the engraving pen. It's an engraving pen to restore that sort of texture so it doesn't look a bit weird. So I'm just going to go through and chunk off all of this stuff. The green stuff you see there is green stuff that I use to fill in air holes, but I just flick that off later. I'm going to do something different. So there's that. And I'll show you the other side. See, so there's the difference. And you can see there's a lot more clarity there. So that's basically what I'm trying to do. Just restore the clarity that's been wrecked by the bad casting job. And you know what? It's kind of satisfying. Looking at all this stuff though, like flopped out on the table, I would recommend that you put a big piece of like, you know, newsprint or something underneath to collect all this stuff, because it makes quite a mess. And yeah, I would say starting off here, just be prepared. This is a messy operation, all of it. So yeah, I didn't put it down because it was just going to mess with my filming setup. But if I were to do this again, definitely I'd lay down a piece of newsprint or something to catch all of this stuff that's coming off. But you can see it works really well, and it's kind of satisfying to see, you know, this starting to emerge underneath all this crap and all this excess of globby resin that was just sort of left. I don't know if, I think the resin, you need to take the air bubbles out of it before you pour it. I used to make prosthetics, and so that's exactly what we would do when we were laminating. We'd mix the resin and make sure, you know, give it a few minutes before you pour it in for the air bubbles to come out. But also I feel like maybe they pulled it out of the mold too fast too, and that's why you get all these weird shapes and these weird blobs. So I don't know. Anyway, we're fixing it and we're going to win, and anyone that says otherwise, they can fucking eat it. I don't know where that came from. Too many fumes. So here's the windows done, and I used this very dental tool, that's my pointer, just to add some clarity to the framing around the windows. You got to be careful with that so that the tool doesn't fly off and put a big gouge through everything. But even if you do gouge it, like, you know, there's tons of ways to fix this, and you will see these ways as we move along. Now I'm going to start adding some things to this building now that I've cleared off a lot of that excess resin that I didn't want. I'm going to put a balcony here. I'm going to do a layout with a few buildings together. If you saw my video where I showed you how to make rubble, it's going to be a setup kind of like that. It's for O group, and I'm going to have it so that the buildings are kind of in clusters. So that being said, I felt this boring wall that has nothing on it could use something like a balcony. So just using this fun-loving metal square here that says żona, which is actually wife in Polish, I'm going to measure out my doorway and get it to sort of 12mm scale. So here's the balcony on the side, and I drew in some stone work around the door with a fine tip Sharpie, and I did the same. I'm putting a doorway on the side of this boring wall. I drew in a couple extra stones here, although I don't think I actually put those in the end. And the front door was looking kind of boring too, so I'm going to stone that out, and I'm going to put an entirely different door in place of the one that's there, because it kind of sucks. And here's the new hero for working with resin and fixing stuff. This is an engraving pen. I got it from Amazon. I think it was about 40 bucks, and you recharge it by plugging it into the computer. But it's like a pen, so you can hold it and you have a lot more dexterity than, say, using a Dremel. Now, I would still recommend having a Dremel too, because the Dremel is going to take care of like larger jobs, but for smaller things like this, get bits like the ones shown here. The saw is handy for cutting in sort of doorways and stuff. And then, yeah, here's the big Dremel if you're going to do a bigger job. But to do something that small, it's going to vibrate way too much, and you're not going to be able to get as much dexterity with it as with this guy. Before you start grinding up resin, make sure you have one of these, or you're going to inhale particles and end up like me. So let's fire up the old circular saw blade, and I'm going to use this initially to cut out my doors. So just be careful. You don't want to do overcuts. But even if you do, like I said, you can always come back in and fix it. And just carefully follow your lines. And just like that, it's pretty satisfying. You don't really need to go right to the edges. I'm going to come in with the chisel later. How about in the camera there, Billy? There you go. Jesus, like I said, I sniffed a little bit of those particles, although I am wearing my mask. And that's it. I'm wearing my mask and a pout underneath and not a single thing else. Okay, I'm lying. I am wearing clothes. Anyway, carefully just chop those out a little bit. Make sure you don't overstep your lines, but even if you do, you're still going to win at the end. There's no other option here. The only option at the Miniature Dork Universe is success stories. Anything else is impossible. Now I'm going to put in this thing. It's called a cutter tool. And I'm going to use this to grind out the majority of the material inside the doorway. So as you go, it's not going to be very flat when you're done. But I'm going to come back with a chisel that's a bit wider than the one I already showed you. And I'll use that to carve out any of the rough areas. And it'll become quite smooth and flat so that I'm going to make a door and glue it in and it'll sit nice and flat. And as you notice, there's quite a mess being generated from this tiny little tool. But like I said, you'd be wise to put down a piece of newsprint just to pick up all this shit. Otherwise, you're going to have a really bad cleanup job like I did after this. You know, I have a cat too. I didn't want any of this stuff to make it into his fur, and then he's like cleaning himself and ingesting this stuff, and then the cat will turn into a cyclops too. After I got the doorways cut out, I'm going to put in this drum. This is a diamond bit. I don't like the diamond bits as much as I like the steel ones. This came with the tool. It comes with all these diamond bits, but the other one was a jeweler's bit, and I think you can buy those if you look online. There's probably jeweler's supplies, but I would get the steel bits instead of these like diamond bits. They kind of suck. But I'm going to use this to take out stuff like this that's in round doorways. Or that barn I showed you at the beginning, it had like a vent up in near the roof. You can use this to make it round again and take all of that excess crap out. So it doesn't work as fast as the steel cutter, but with a little bit of perseverance you end up winning, like Charlie Sheen. Now these doorways, to square these up, I'm going to take a chisel. This one's a bit wider and it seems to be exactly the width that I need, and there it is. Just get any of that excess resin out and make it deep enough so that your door won't look too flat, like it'll be inset a little bit. And take your time, because you don't want to slip or push too hard, because you might take a giant chip of your resin out, or slip and put that bloody chisel right through the web of your thumb, in which case you will scream. I wanted to put some areas where the stucco has broken off, so we've got back to Mr. Circular Saw, and I'm just going to cut in the lines that I drew, and cut them in quite deep, because in order to get relief for this, I'm going to have to carve away a bit of the material so that it looks like it's sort of inset from the stucco, make it look realistic. You'll see as I'm going along what I'm talking about. With a fine pointy bit, I'm going to render in all these stones around the doors. So these, like I said a couple times before, I think the diamond bits don't cut quite as quickly, so got to be a bit more patient. So just be careful, stay within your lines, and get those stones looking really nice. So the outer edge of the stones I didn't cut out with the saw because I don't want them to be too uniform, right? Like I could have just taken that saw blade and just gone down the outer edge of the stones to get that outer border, but I wanted them to look random. So, you know, you can use whatever method you like, but that's how I did it with the door. Once I had that all lined out, I went back to the cutter tool and took off some of the stuff around the edges so that it looked like the stones were protruding out from the stucco a bit. The texture is so rough and the casting is so crappy that you can kind of get away with this, and I didn't end up with, you know, an indentation around the entire door, even though I hacked away quite a bit of material. I just sort of blended it out with the rest of the wall, and it, well, you'll see down the line, it ended up working out quite well, and I was pretty bloody chuffed. After I got that done, I moved on to all these weird little tendrils of treachery that ended up all over this building somehow. I chiseled the majority of it off, and now I'm just going to restore some of the wall texture to the corners. And overall, the squareness of the building is just completely destroyed. So I'm not too worried, though. It's going to add overall to the sort of damaged look. And now I'll go in and start with these stones. So I'm going to emboss it in not quite far, but, you know, not quite a millimeter, but close, just so that it looks like, you know, the volume of the stucco is represented here. I brought that in a little farther than what I drew. I wanted it a bit bigger. And I took some of my lines right out, but I see some on the corner there, so I just rejoined it around to draw in my stonework. Then get out a toothbrush, though not the one you're currently using for your teeth, and assess your work. I'm done with the engraving pen, so I've got the stonework around the door, some areas where the stucco fell off, some battle damage, some bullet impacts, and light. It was like small caliber cannon. I put the Peter Pig chimney on, and I'm going to use some green stuff to sort of blend it in with the rest of the roof. There's a lot of air bubbles on the roof. I'm not going to fix those. That's too much. If you wanted to fix the roof, you could just sand out all of the tiled areas and then get some of that model railroad tile and sort of just cut out the pieces and glue them where you cut them out. You could just easily measure that out and cut it to size and just glue it on the way I'm going to do the doors later. But I bailed on that because that's a bit more, you know, there's limits to even my OCD. So we're just going to go with that, and we're just going to deal with the fucked up air bubbles. It's not too bad in the roof. The roof is busy. There's way more going on in the roof than in the walls. When it's in the walls, it really stands out. But yeah, I put in the battle damage, and I added a crack at the back, but I'll show you that later. This door I'm going to replace entirely with one just made out of like evergreen plastic. This is the sort of layout that I'm going with, and my building is going to tuck up into the corner here by this sort of garage-like thing. And so my balcony is going to be in that area there. That would have just been sort of, it would have been a very boring area. That's why I thought I'd put the balcony in, just to add a little bit of interest. And, you know, I like making these things very immersive. So the main part of the balcony is just going to be a piece of this, you know, it's like 1 millimeter thick plastic sheet, or maybe more like 2 millimeters, or whatever that is in inches. So for the actual balcony, I use this decorative railing. It's from Microform Models. So for you fellas in the States, it is in your country, and so you can order all kinds of great stuff from them and not pay the ridiculous shipping and handling fees that we sometimes get faced with. I'll put the link around here somewhere. But yeah, I cut these out with a miter box and a jeweler saw. I'll show you what I used. There's other ways you can do this. This is what I did because this is what I have. But cut it to size carefully, and then I'll super glue it to the platform here and then stick it onto the building. I cut out a little seat too for that to fit in. I use this jeweler saw to cut these things out, and if you've watched my videos, you've seen me use these before. They're not that expensive to get. I imagine you could probably buy one online at a jeweler's supply place. And then I use this, this is a jeweler's miter box for doing right angles and 45-degree angles. And this thing here is a bit more pricey. Again, this is just what I have because I had it from when I was making jewelry. But it's working out great for my hobbies. But this thing is pretty expensive. So I'm sure there's other miter boxes you can do if you want to cut out square things. Or you can just carefully eyeball it too and just do some filling and some filing, right? Roughen up your surfaces to be glued on some like 180 sandpaper, something fairly rough, and that'll give the super glue something to bond to. And just make sure you get all your surfaces. Then apply some super glue. I put the narrow ends of the posts down and the wider things up so it looked kind of vase-like. But when I look at pictures, it looks like this stuff is usually done the other way around. So my name Ryan. But anyway, that's how I did it. And just get that nice and secure. And just go around and stick the pieces on. I mean, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Once that was all done, I had a little bit of an extra lip, and I took an X-Acto saw and I sawed it off just like that. The balcony wasn't fitting particularly square on the spot provided, so I'm just going to use this X-Acto knife and carve out any areas that are sort of preventing that from sitting square. I almost carved out like a little seat. And with the help of Mr. Chisel, we took this to the next level of excellence. And the thing fit on beautifully and nice and square, even though it doesn't look like it there. It did, but you'll see that down the line. Before I glued the balcony on, though, I had to make all the doors and the shutters. It would have been hard to put the balcony doors on with the balcony in place. So anyway, I did all of these first. I put wood texture in with a, like a razor saw and just sort of fashioned out some simple shutters. And the front door I replaced with plastic too. I used evergreen sheet that already had like the notches in it. So the shutters for the windows, the notches were finer, like maybe 1 millimeter apart, and then for the door, it's roughly like 2 millimeters apart. So I just need to make the door for the balcony, and then I'll glue the balcony on. So I cut all my pieces to size for the balcony doors, and I put wood texture in again by dragging a razor saw over the surface, and now I'm just going to glue all the little pieces together to make my doors. I'm using a piece of, it's always good to have a piece of floor tile like this, and that way when you're gluing things it's not going to stick to it. So I got my doors made, the side door and the balcony doors, and now we'll stick all of that stuff down to the building. So we'll start off with the side door, and we're going to use some super glue. Put a couple drops in, 1, 2, don't get too crazy. I'm going to swish it around with the dental tool, grab the bloody door, and you guessed it, I'm going to take it and stuff it in the spot that I cut out for the door. Big surprise. Bet you that really shocked the hell out of you. Anyway, there's that. Just use the tweezers to get it into position before the crazy glue makes its instant bond. And now we'll do the balcony. So same procedure, a couple of drops of super glue, and I don't know what I'm doing here, but anyway, let's get on with it, Billy. We can spread that shit around, yeah. And then we're going to take, I've marked left and right because the door wasn't 100% square, so we did a little fiddling to get it to fit. And there's the right side, and we're going to use the dental pick to register this. And once again, we are zeroing in on another smashing success story. I'm sure your excitement is almost out of control. And now what are we going to do next?
I know, Davies. We're gonna glue the balcony on with some of this two-part epoxy. We're gonna use this because it's not as brittle as crazy glue and it won't fracture if it gets dropped or something.
Well done, glue fume infused voice in my head. So let's put some of this down and we'll mix it up and fire it into place. Now, for some reason, one side is coming out and the other side is not. And I'm pressing it so hard that I feel like my freaking fingers are going to break off. But I think we've achieved what we need to achieve. Put the bloody lid on, Joey. There it is. Now, get out a dental pick. Here, we'll speed this up. I'm going to mix all of that in, mix it very thoroughly. And then, obviously, we're going to apply it to the balcony and we'll bloody well stick it on. This glue will also fill in any gaps, which is kind of nice. And then we'll fire the balcony on with a little bit of precision. And this stuff takes about 5 minutes to dry, so you don't have to be in a massive rush. You don't want to slide it all around though and get this crappy stuff everywhere. And just have your dental pick ready and just sort of smooth out your seam. And when that's dry in 5 minutes, it will be nice and solid. If you have any areas where there was some excess, wait for the epoxy to start to kick, and then it gets kind of rubbery and you'll be able to just like chop it off like this. It looks like a booger. Yeah, you can just cut it away and it'll come off fairly smooth. It's being a bit of a dick here, but you know what I mean. It's not going to be like super messy and stringy or something. And once that has cured, it will be on secured very well, and this is how this is going to look. So that balcony will fill that area, and I think it looks pretty bloody good considering that we started off with a blob of resin and air bubbles, and now it's actually starting to resemble a period accurate, Italian building for Salerno area. The door looks nice. That looks nice. Pretty chuffed. And just because that wasn't enough, I thought I'd take it up to another level and make it into a cafe. I'm using these embossed letters. This is from Greenstuff World. Stuff is kind of pricey, but boy, does it ever look cool. So I'm going to chop, or I already did, I guess. I've chopped out the sign. I looked up how to spell cafe in Italian, and it's pretty similar. And look, there was a miniature dorkloid on the backing card. Like and subscribe to Miniature Dork Universe, or you will suffer. Okay, not really. We all know it's all fun and games at Miniature Dork Universe. Yeah, right. Back to what we're doing. So just trim any of the excess away with a hobby knife. If you have these letters, though, be careful because it's like mat board or something, and it can delaminate pretty easily. So you get like little layers of it peeling off. Especially this little accent here. I had to mess around with it a bunch of times to get it proper, and I wrecked a couple of them. And if that wasn't enough, I thought I would take it to next levels of stupid with this Photoetched 1/144 scale furniture. And I nearly lost my mind. First things first, we're going to make a little registration mark just using a pencil, just like that. And I'm going to use some golden acrylic gel. I'm sure you've seen me use this before to stick the letters on. So it's just a bit tougher than your basic white glue or PVA glue, but it has a bit more body than, say, super glue. And I'm using that because the wall texture is pretty rough, so it's not going to sit super flat. So this gel will give it a bit of play so I can get the letters sort of squared up nicely and not have it look all messed up. Then we'll really speed this up. Then with some tweezers and a dental pick and a brush, I'm going to apply the gel and get these guys in using my registration mark, and there it is. Now we'll grab some fun-loving Mr. Surfacer, and we're going to use that to put some of the surface texture that might have got ground off, but also to fill in any areas like around the railing so you don't see where the pieces are joined. And I'm going to give some texture to the floor on the balcony and underneath. Just anywhere where you want to add some texture, fired on with Mr. Surfacer. Unfortunately, I think Mr. Surfacer has been banned in Canada. It's got some kind of shit in it that gives you cancer. I'm going to fire some on the roof too to try to tone down some of those air bubbles. And then I'm going to paint it in all around those embossed letters just so that it ties it in with the building a bit more, but also adheres it down a little more securely, because you can never have too much of that. Now, I did have too much of this. This was insane, putting this Photoetch brass together. It made me say a lot of bad words, and yeah. Well, strangely, it was just the table. The table seemed like it was going to be the easiest thing, and I thought I'd just use my jeweler's miter thing here to get all the right angle bends, but just about nothing worked out well on this table. I did manage to get it together, but like I said, not without a lot of bad language, and yeah. Definitely you might need one of those Photoetch bendy devices, I don't know. Here I'm just filing off some of the sprue gate there that's left from the Photoetch, and I thought, yeah, I'll just bend that over like this, but no, it did not bend easy. I probably should have annealed it first by heating it with like a micro torch or something, but yeah, I didn't. So instead I toiled with it and yeah, punched some inanimate objects, maybe drank a bubbly buddy, and but there's only one outcome at the Miniature Dork Universe. It's a success story. That's all we do. So despite the treachery, we persevered. We just kept going. We kept punching some stuff. We kept drinking some beer. Well, not really. I didn't drink that many beers. If I did, it would be impossible. But I'll tell you what, I used to make jewelry, and I swear to God, doing like a pave setting with little diamonds was easier than doing this. This was just nuts. I did get the table together. I stuck it down close to the door there. So the idea is the cafe big doors open up and it's sort of like a semi-open place with a little bit of a patio outside for people to sit. So there's the table, and now onto the chairs. And surprisingly, even though the chairs look way more complex, they were a lot easier to put together. And here's one put together by the table. And we'll continue on. Here's all the chairs completed, and I'm just keeping them. I'm not going to stick the chairs down because it'll interfere with painting the building, so I'll leave them loose, and I'm just going to toss them around. You know, it's kind of a messy war zone, so we're not going to have everything like super neatly tucked in. And with that done, it was time to crack open this nice friendly little Galaxy IPA and let that soothe my aching brain. Next up was some 2-part epoxy putty, and we're all familiar with this. That turns into green stuff. You mix the 2 parts together and then smoosh it into that seam in between the chimney and the roof. And it's very sculptable. I'm using water. If you put water on the tip of the tool doesn't really stick to the putty, and then it becomes easy to work with. I also use some of the green stuff to fill in the larger air bubbles like this one around the door. And again, using water and a tool. This is a sculptor tool. I'm using it to fill it in and sculpt in the shape of the stone. I was thinking before I would just roughly stuff in the green stuff and then grind it to shape, but that turned out to be a bit of a wank. The grinder, the little engraver tool, was just ripping out the green stuff, and so this was the way that worked with success. And you know we like success at Miniature Dork Universe. One of my last steps was just to make some like rudimentary door handles, and I thought on the huge cafe doors I would make some like metal rings So I just wrap some extruded sprue around a pin, and then you slice off little jump rings with a scalpel. It's a bit tricky, so that's why I did a lot of them, because some of them just fly off, but I'm just cutting off the little pieces and setting them in a tray. And there's other little bits for my little hinge that are in there. And yeah, it's very fiddly work. And if you're going to work, you know, I went down to 15 mil from 172, and that was something. And now if you go down to like 10 and 12 millimeter, yeah, just get ready to drop a lot of stuff and yeah, rage a little bit as you're trying to find it on the floor, these tiny little things. But once again, with a little perseverance and a lot of patience, you can get this to work. So I'm going to rub my dental tool on the freaking cutting mat, and it makes it static electricity. So you can just pick up the piece that you need to pick up and just fire it into place. And of course, because I'm on film, it's not going to fire into place exceptionally easily, but here. After sacrificing an alpaca to the dark one, the forces align and you're able to position that. And it looks a little squirrely, and it is, but you will see the end result. It's going to be pretty fun. All these little crazy details. So let's get a bit of the liquid cement. I took a lot of it off because if there's too much of the glue, that piece is just going to come off with the brush. So you got to be very careful and develop a light touch. And that's how you get each one of these little pieces on. And so you're going to invest a bit of time. And after pissing around with this for many, many minutes, you will eventually start getting somewhere. So it might be kind of hard to see, but I've got the two sort of housings on for this thing. And then I've dropped the two little rings on. And now I'm putting on like a little little piece in the center that's sort of like the shackle that the rings go through. So these buildings are kind of like Renaissance period buildings, but that's actually pretty common in Italy. And so yeah, I wanted the door to have kind of crude elements in it. Just make sure you have like dental pick and all kinds of assistive things, and then after you fight with the stuff like this for a while, you know, and then maybe say some bad words and then get it on something different and just keep, you know, now that it's staticky, it wants to stick to everything. But look, eventually you get it on and then you hit it with a bit of glue, and now you can start to push that into where it needs to be and you win. And that's it. I gave the whole thing a primer coat. I just used, you know, hardware store spray primer. Primer kind of etches itself into the surface a bit better than some of the acrylic primer, so that's why I used it. And as you can see, it turned out looking pretty bloody good. Definitely better than what we started with. I'll pop a little picture up in the corner here. Yeah. So that's going to do it for this. And there's the chairs. I just hit that with a bit of the primer. Just be careful not to go too nutso with it, or else you're going to have a big glob and lose all your details. But yeah, and in any areas where there's still some air bubbles in the windows, that's fine for me. It kind of looks like bullet holes or shrapnel damage, so I'll paint it up to kind of reflect that. There's our side door. It's looking pretty good. And the cracked off stucco in places. But that's going to do it. So once again, thanks for joining me on this Miniature Dork Universe adventure, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Bye for now.